You're not missing anything if you can't hear me. It's fine. No one's been able to fix the chant issue in 40 years.
Bam. Now, folks, because I had to manually input two different audios, it is going to be important for you to let me know if I am horridly louder than Chant, or Chant is horridly louder than me, or if we're quiet. Just because this is the non-ideal audio situation where everyone's coming in as separate input, but we are here, and that's what matters. Thank you for your patience with us. I had suspicions, and my suspicions were in fact correct. No. Oh, there's one more thing that we've got to set off here that you can also tell me if it's too loud. Our music. There we go. Oh no, you're gonna have double music. Hold on. There we go. All right, folks. It's a party. It's a party, and everyone with ears and everyone without ears are all invited. Um, that's a really strong start to the stream. We are so happy to be back, and we're gonna do some really exciting stuff this this stream because we're creating a hollow. Not only are we creating a hollow, we're creating a hollow for my characters, my actual play characters X, and you're gonna help us create the hollow. And then once we've created this hollow and the entity within it, the actual playcast and maybe a special guest will play through it for our end of campaign stream. So let's see here. I could come up a bit in volume. That's no one ever says that about me. There we go, folks. How is that? So yeah, that's where we're at. I am CJ. My pronouns are they them. Anyone who doesn't know me, I am Rowan Rick and Deckard's community marketing and customer service person, and I'm gonna pass it over to Chant to say hi and introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Chant. I'm he or they. I'm the producer for Hollows, which means I'm like half cheerleader, half production accountant, half wild spreadsheet farmer. That's 1.5 people, which feels about right, honestly. If you're following the Kickstarter, you may know me from the insane number of updates that I've been sending you, like far more often than you want during this campaign. Thanks for sticking it out, folks. We appreciate you.
Just have so much to tell you. Like when the weapons blogs are done, you get to hear about the factions, and realistically, there's so much content for Hollows that we could continue writing these blogs. I'm not going to make any promises one way or another, but we could continue writing these blogs
Maybe, maybe we, do.
long after the campaign's done. So, um, great. Well, hope you're all doing okay today. Feel free to drop it in chat. The chat is this way. The chat is this way for me. We are having a very casual stream today. I mean, we're going to get some stuff done, but if you have any questions, any comments, pop them in chat and we'll probably address them, unless they're like, is the moon made of cheese? Actually, I probably would also address that. So, without any
Oh
further
no,
ado.
no, we are not setting Hollow's canon by debating what substance the moon is made of.
Oh no, just in real life,
Oh, the actual. Well, yeah, obviously
I
it is.
won't. I'm not authorized to make hollows canon, except for this specific hollow. But I can tell you that the moon, for real, is made of cheese. So, now that we've got that out of the way.
Settling the big questions first.
And I think I am also keeping an eye on YouTube comments as well. So if you are joining us from YouTube, I should get your comments too. I will try to focus. It's very hard for me. So, Chant, we're making a hollow for Alexandra's ex. But before we get to that, is anyone here not familiar with hollows at all? Do we need to pitch hollows, do you think?
If so, how did you get here?
What are you doing? Why are you here? I mean, you're
We're
welcome,
sorry.
but um,
Maybe
so
we should.
yeah. Uh, would you like to, or
Sure.
go for it?
Hollows is a tabletop role playing game set in a version of Victorian England that is somehow even worse than actual Victorian England, which is really saying a lot, where empire has collapsed and where people's kind of personal, spiritual, and ethical tapestry is also collapsing, preyed upon by what our lovely writers like to call the idiot parasite gods, the grand malignancies, which are all of the worst things that humanity is prey to, given form and externalized so that you can kick the shit out of them and their servants. And in Hollows, you play hunters, who are people who are infected by these malignancies, but aren't so far gone yet that they have become a hollow. And you're going to find out exactly what a hollow is in the next 60 minutes. It's kind of the point. But as hunters, you get to go into other people's hollows, kick in the doors of their personal hell, and either put them out of their misery, or if you're really lucky and you like playing on hard mode, try to redeem them.
Yeah,
I've
I
never
think
seen it done yet.
no, we haven't, but that's one of my favorite aspects of it, right? I love this grimdark stuff, but I also like when there's this opportunity for some sort of hope. Yeah, you can go into the Hollow and murder the Lord of the Hollow, not a problem. Or you can redeem them. I mean, they don't get to like walk out of the Hollow and like be.
They can come to the pub with you, though.
They can come to the pub with you, also known as your refuge. Yeah, and then they can try to help the cause from within the refuge. So you know, sometimes, and I would say that really, just to bring it back around to the backer kit right now, those two new hollows that we just unlocked. I think both of those entities are pretty prime suspects for maybe redemption rather than just flat out murder. Wouldn't you say?
I think so, and I think it's kind of neat that you can have an artist collective in your hollow, in your refuge, when you're done.
I'm a big fan of that. I think that makes it worth the redemption, just like straight up, right? But without further ado, which I think I've said 3 times now.
With
Let's,
some further ado,
with some further ado, let's get into it. So, we said our
so
hellos, and I think we've kind of hinted on the fact that, no, I said it straight out, that this is going to be the finale stream. Very exciting. Like I said, we're hoping maybe we'll get a special guest in as well, but it's going to be the AP cast, which is myself, Chant, Elaine, who's another one of our producers, and Chris Taylor, who's of course one of our writers. They are going to be the players, and of course Grant, how it will be our GM. So it's going to be good fun. It's been good fun. There's a new episode coming out of our AP probably next week at the usual time. So I know that you've all been looking for it, and episode 2 will be up. Is up. The live version is already up on YouTube, but episode 2 will be up on YouTube in like a cleaner, nicer video format soon. It's actually currently formatting. So
and so importantly, chat, that means that what CJ and I get to do today, and what you get to help us with over the next 11 days, right, is creating something, however ludicrously overpowered it is, however buck wild it is, however off the wall, upsettingly surreal horror it is, Grant Howard has to run it. He's committed to this. There's no way out. We can do anything and he can't stop us.
And you have the power in your hands, chat. And subsequently, if you are watching this on VOD, there's going to be polls and stuff up on the backer kit page, so you are not missing out either. Thank you, by the way, everyone, just for feeding back about the audio and stuff. Keep us updated, and let me talk a little bit. I think probably what's a good starting point is maybe talking about. Do we want to talk a little bit about Hollow's creation, or shall I talk about Alexandra?
I think before we dive into creating this Hollow, I think there's 2 things that I want to remember to say, and if I don't say them right now, I will forget them. And the first is what I want to do with this stream, because we've only got limited time, right, is for us to set up the story of the Hollow and think about how we take all of these cool, juicy story elements about a horrible person who's done horrible things and how we turn those into, 1, a dungeon that you can adventure through even, and 2, game mechanics for actual powers that reflect that story, right? So that we're not just making big man who punch hard right? We're making somebody's like romantic disaster fully narrativized. And the second thing I want to say is that even though Grant and Chris have trusted us to go solo and do this, they have also supplied us with the Hollow and Entity Creation chapter from the Hollow's core book. So we're not entirely just pulling this out of our ass, although to a certain extent we definitely are. We are referring to the material in the Hollow's core book that we hope empowers you all to do this exact same thing and to take your worst nightmares and turn them into a game. See how that goes?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. This is also sort of a trial run for that that document as well, because as far as I know, this hasn't really been handed to anyone that isn't Chris or Grant and gone make a thing. So we, as a group, as a collective here today, are going to try to make a thing. And see how well it goes. I read through it, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I think we're going to make a thing. So.
I think so. We're certainly going to make a thing. And because it's Hollows, it doesn't really matter if the thing that we make is a juggernaut that kills player characters in like half a turn, right? Because you can't kill them meaningfully. They'll be back.
They'll wake up in the refuge, and
Yeah.
one of the cool things about Hollows is one of the ways that you progress is by dying. So, you know.
So if you lose the same fight enough times, eventually you will level up. The aim is not for you to lose the same fight multiple times because it's not fun. Um,
But if you do,
but if you
there's a
do, there's a silver
consolation
lining,
prize.
right? Yeah.
So, Alexandra, some of you have been watching the AP, so you know about Alexandra already. Um, she's objectively kind of a piece of shit herself. So to think that her nemesis is also a piece of shit, you know, who do you root for? Well, definitely Alexandra, but only by circumstance, I think.
Because the camera is behind her.
Because, yes, exactly. So, Alexandra grew up very well off. She's a blue blood noble. That is her origin. So she was used to the finer things in life. She also just kind of wanted to like read her books and play her violin and walk around in her rose garden and be left the hell alone, but she was expected to marry. She's a bit of a snob. So she also thought that most of the suitors that were presented to her were well beneath her and no thank you. And she made no she had no qualms of telling people this. And she turned down one suitor particularly ingraciously, and he took it personally, very personally. So when you are creating your hunter, you have basically a seed. This is the moment that the malignancy was able to infect you as well. It's objectively probably the worst day of your life. And Alexandra's was when this suitor rallied a bunch of people who were upset at Alexandra's family for their hoarding of power and resources, and marched these people under the pretense of goodness and righteousness, marched these people on their manor and killed everyone except Alexandra and let her go.
Do we know
And
how she survived?
uh,
He wanted her to walk away from it?
he wanted her to walk away from it. Yeah,
Interesting.
it wasn't a situation of her escaping. It was they'd gotten everyone else, and he turned her away and let her go. And she left, and she regretted just leaving for the rest of her, you know, from then until now, until this current situation in the actual play here, where her goal is right now to murder her ex. She's sort of established this.
Not relatable, definitely fantasy.
Yeah, definitely.
All of us.
um, she's established this sort of team of hunters, right? That's being funded by her remaining wealth that she had access to through the Crown faction. And she's done it in this way where she's like, yes, I'm very magnanimous. I'm going to create this team so that we can make this place better and get rid of these hollows. And really, she knows that her ex is somewhere and is a hollow somewhere, and she is going to murder him by her own hand. God damn it. So
Was
she's not
this a deliberate
magnanimous at
statement
all.
on Victorian philanthropy? Because I fucking love it if it was. Little bit of history in there for you,
It's
if you like.
self-serving philanthropy,
Mm,
also known as philanthropy, in
hmm
many cases. But that's that that we could dissect that for the next hour, or we could talk about all of this.
So I'm taking notes on everything that you said, right? Which is why I'm occasionally going, donning my Hollows therapist persona.
Oh
Um,
no.
only thinking about how this reflects Alexandra. Not at all Alexandra's player. It's fine, don't worry. And we're never getting into Merlin's Hollow, so that's equally
Like,
good.
we're not talking about what happened to Merlin. So yes, I've laid
No,
myself bare here. It's fine. I don't know. I think that I
I
could
think this
talk a
is a pretty
little.
universal experience.
Yeah, I could talk a little bit about like the influences that building Alexandra had, but I think that'll just naturally slip out. So continuing on,
Yeah.
um,
So what
she's
I'm
not.
taking from this,
Yeah.
sorry,
No, I was just gonna say
what
she's
the
not
notes I've
heard
got so
anything
far.
from him. Go ahead. Um,
I've got Alexandra's violin and Alexandra's rose garden as
mhm.
motifs that we can bring in when we're designing the hollow. Because the aim of the game here, chat, is to fuck Alexandra up a little bit more with every location in this hollow that we venture through, right? And hopefully to put in some interesting choices that will cause some interesting tensions with the rest of the party, so we get to explore some different sides of people's characters. So we can use her rose garden. I think we can potentially do something interesting with the mob that he whipped up.
Oh, definitely. I think, and one thing that was interesting is, that hasn't happened yet, but I think that mob is going to be the theme of. So obviously we also have the mob as far as they may be some of the vassals, but we'll get to that later.
Mm.
But I know that Grant has mentioned wanting to use this theme of the mob in Alexandra's different negative times and worst times in Hollows and flashbacks and things like that. So I think that that's like a thematic circle that we're drawing there, and I think that horrifying, very good. And chat, I know you're all sitting here hanging out, listening patiently, but if while we're talking about this something occurs to you, please drop it in chat. Because every step of this way is customizable by you. Alexandra's terrible, but nothing that she has experienced or has done is fully set in stone. I'm always up for what makes a good story, so.
Especially if we can make it worse. And by worse, I mean harder hitting and more memorable.
We love it.
Um, so the other thing that I thought was really interesting is that he let her live, right? And I think we can, when it comes to power, we can do something quite interesting there with what happens if there's like multiple hunters in a zone that he could target.
I like that. Yeah, make
Like we can
something
do,
mechanical about that.
yeah, like we can do something around the motif of live to tell the tale,
Oh,
maybe.
I don't know if this is more of a hindrance on a mechanical scale, but if I was designing this, so I'm designing this with Alexandra in mind at the moment, obviously, but um, to design it on a more overarching standpoint, what if there's some sort of ability where either and or, so I'm kind of workshopping this, either it's that they purposefully leave one player till last, um, and the other aspect of that is there a way maybe for every time that player either hits or misses that it affects their party members?
There definitely can be.
I feel like that would be, so basically I'm imagining, so extrapolating from kind of the experience that Alexandra had, it seems like some of the power here is singling someone out and making them powerless. And so, one of the ways that someone could feel powerless in a combat situation would be every time you take try to take power, try to take control of the situation, there's a potential that you are going to hurt the wrong person, that you're going to hurt the people you care about, that, you know, the people on your team might get hurt because you're trying to have power. And so he's sequestering this power from one, and mechanically, if this was just a design for any party, you know, you would be, as the as the GM, you'd be looking for whatever player this would fuck up the most.
There are two ways you could play it, right? You can look for whichever player it fucks up the most, or you can say, hey, the player that I'm probably going to use this on, Alex, the character that I'm going to use it on, has a knife and a book, right? So if you make it hard for Alex to take control and you make it hard and risky for her to do violence, she has actually got something she can fall back on. You're not excluding her from the fight completely, you're just pushing her to use a different set of abilities than she usually does.
True. Especially Alex, who, like, characteristically is knife in book, but just tries to stab the shit out of things all of the
Yeah,
time. This is the GM being like, no, fuck that, stop.
use the fucking book,
Use the
Alex!
book. Which, on a complete side note, I have entertained the possibility that one of her potential positive character arcs might be being a little less bloodthirsty and a little more witchy. So, you know, it all leans together. We've got a few
Yeah.
chat comments here. Simon says one of the quandaries about a mob is the question of their culpability. So, like, if you have to fight them, are you just killing pawns of the true evil, or are they equally at fault?
Well, that's a real fun question in Hollows, because first you got to ask yourself, are they real?
Mm-hmm. They may be some sort of invented, like a. Oh, my brain farted on the word, but a simile is not the word I'm looking for. But some invented version of this mob that isn't actually.
Yeah.
The other
Because
thing
there are
is. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
because there are real people in Hollows, but the question of who in a Hollow is real is, like, apart from the Lord is unquestionably real. The question of who is real and how real they are and whether they can survive or exist outside the Hollow is kind of murky, and it depends. And it's probably something that if you're going to go in and do a lot of murder, you should consider before you go in and start randomly stabbing at people.
Mm-hmm.
But we can, as GMs, decide how easy we want to make that choice or how hard.
Yeah, I also will say, from a convenient storytelling perspective on my end, I did and this doesn't answer all the questions or say what is right or what is wrong, but for me it was important for me to distinguish that he misled the mob as well, and that also the mob had valid upset and concern, and they were just rallied by someone who had an ulterior motive. So, realistically speaking, it's kind of multifaceted and difficult and nuanced in that way, but also that, like, objectively the actual people that were the actual mob, other than murdering an entire family because, you know, they're upset about power, which, we're not gonna. But, like, outside of the actual act of murder, they really weren't all that culpable because they were objectively oppressed in this situation, and they were given the opportunity to overthrow that balance of power. So, when I created this early on, for me, and, like, my comfort with the story that I was creating for Alexandra, I was like, no, man, the mob were, like, objectively right. Um, upsettingly, perhaps they were objectively correct. It's just that the way that it was achieved was being rallied by basically another lord, or son of a lord, or, who was putting this false pretense of, like, this isn't right and you deserve better, so we're gonna march on that, when really it was for selfish purposes. So definitely the real monster here is him, and not the mob. But there's also the question of, do we put the mob in this hollow? Do we put Alexandra's dead family in this hollow? Which I think the answer for the second one is definitely.
Oh, hell yeah. But players can decide how they want to interact with them, and where we choose to place them in the hollow makes a big difference on the options that we open up, right? Because if you put someone in as an entity, like if we put the mob together into a horrible multi-headed, like tentacled entity and said, "This is it, you fight it now," you don't have a choice but to kill it. But if you put them in as just population of the hollow, and you make them a hazard that people can choose to interact with however they want. They can choose to avoid them, or they can talk them down, or potentially even win them around, and use them to get an advantage in a boss fight. Oh, maybe
Yeah,
that's fun. I don't know.
I think that's fun.
Um,
I want to jump right on that. In that, if these real people who were actually part of the mob are now stuck in this hollow, there's a whole potential there for like, hey, you were used. And Simon says these background nuances seem to point to relics.
Correct. The way that you would mechanize this is to make the mob potentially a relic or a vassal that can not a vassal, sorry, a thrall that can be turned into a relic depending on how you interact with it. So something that could be an enemy, but if you approach it correctly and if you resolve the challenge in a certain way, becomes a relic, becomes a tool that you can wield. And I don't think anyone's done that before.
That's cool.
Are
Should
we
definitely
clever?
do
Might be
that.
clever. Thanks, Simon.
Yeah, thank you. Also, Chant, are you taking notes? Because I'm just talking.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I
Um,
trust. Thank
I'm
you.
taking the world's least helpful notes in silver highlighter on white paper, and I can see them about as well as you can see them on screen,
You
folks.
know, on the upside, it's all recorded, so when we inevitably go, what does that mean? We can actually go back and listen, so. Plus side.
I've never watched one of my own streams, and I ain't starting now.
I'll go back. It's okay. I'll take the hit.
Okay,
I'll
thank
listen.
you.
I'll listen to myself. Okay. Um. So
The other
something.
sorry,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
the other thing that's really cool about having a mob in there and talking about issues of culpability, right? And the mob, in a sense, reclaiming their power is that we've got Elaine's character, Rosie, who is a Hollowborn, who used to be one of these sort of faceless, almost nameless beings toiling away in a hollow
Yeah.
through no fault of their own and with very little free will. And how Rosie chooses to approach that question of the mob is going to give Elaine a really cool character moment, I think.
I think so. Yeah. I think that's something notable here as well. Is there's because we are designing this for our party, and like you may then in the future chat be in a similar situation where you're like, I'm designing a hollow for your party, or I'm designing a hollow with my GM because my character has hollowed, which
It will happen.
it's gonna be so good when it does. But no, there was a point to that sentence. I just got really distracted by the concept of creating an entire hollow for your character who is hollowed, which is so cool. Yes. What I was saying is that we're obviously going to want to put a lot of good moments here for everyone in the party. And that's not going to be too difficult to do because, like, Sergeant Weeks was a former sergeant. So is already kind of connected to the crown and had some like distant connections to the Breckets as well, which is Alexandra's surname. But before we go too far, I want to say something we've alluded to but haven't said yet, is that I think my favorite idea I've had so far that is just freaking harrowing is where we decided the hollow is going to be, which we decided just before the stream because it felt like a big detail. And that's the manor house of Alexandra's family. This is why she hasn't been able to find her ex, because of course she wouldn't go home to where everyone she loved was murdered. And she's looking everywhere for him, but she never really thought about the fact that maybe he stayed there. And that's what he did. And also that raises another question, right, Chant? And it's one that I don't have an answer to. And I don't even know if it's important to answer it. But it makes you wonder how soon after the atrocities that they committed that he hollowed.
That is a really interesting question.
Because...
Is it instant? I feel like it's certainly imminent. I think this brings us back to talking about how the malignancies get hold on you, which probably then leads us afterwards into talking about which malignancy we're dealing with here.
Yeah.
But we always say that the seed is the worst day of your life, right? But we know that hunters don't hollow immediately. They go through the worst day of their life. What will one day be the flavor and the texture of their hollow is there. But afterwards, they kind of just go on about their business. So how corrupted, how infected do you think the X was? How close to tipping was he when he did this? Was this what started it, or is this what finished it?
Right. And that's an excellent question that I don't have an immediate answer to myself. In that there's a lot of interest there as well in chat. If you have any ideas, drop them in. But there's the this was so abhorrent and so um, almost maybe even counterintuitive to, you know, he had it boiling in him or whatever, but you know that this hit him and within hours or within days he was gone. Um, I would say if we're going within instantaneous, I'd double down and say it happened within hours. Um,
I would say the same, and I think from a storytelling perspective, right? Unless we want to write that story, and unless we've got a reason to generate like that whole extra arc of plot, and it's something that we'd want to build into the Hollow, just ignore it. Just say that it happened really quickly. This
yeah,
was it. This was the culmination.
because I mean, like, I understand that your worst day could be anything, but to say that like oh, so okay. So I was about to get to this. Thank you, Tufty. Says so the breakup. So is the breakup the seed, and then the murderous mob the hollowing. And this is an interesting thought, right? This is the only other thing that I really thought of without really, really, really super developing this X. Like we're still going to develop him quite a lot. We're making his hollow, so there's going to be a lot of aspects of him and his experience in there. But actually, and I have two thoughts, and I'm going to present them both really quick. One is the worst day. So he must have had a pretty good life if the worst day of his life was Alexandra turning him down. Now there could be some extra. There could be some extra things there. Maybe you could go as deep as you want in this. Like maybe his family was actually like financially suffering even though he was a lord, and he and Alexandra was his key to for them to continue to live their life, and she was completely uninterested and completely quite rude and awful about it. And maybe that him realizing that he could not that he didn't have the means to save his family could have been the worst day of his life. It might not be. I mean, like, obviously when I created this guy, I didn't think about him that much. So to me, he was this kind of like whiny baby that was sad that he got turned down. But there could be. It's almost more interesting if there's more nuance to that than just that. And maybe if the seed was the breakup, it's not because I mean there's some pride element there as well, and we'll figure out which grand malignancy it is soon. But like maybe it's not just as simple as like, oh, I've never been turned down in my life. Maybe maybe there's a situation here where everything rested on this.
Where his failure of personal charm ruined his entire family.
Yeah.
Like,
And
that's it. And one of the reasons that he's in Alexandra's house now, right, is that his family home's been fucking repossessed by the bailiffs.
right. Yeah.
He has nowhere else to be. I, I love a villain who is not relatable, not like, oh, they were bullied as a child and it's not their fault, but a villain who's got a little bit of heart and a bit of humanity to them, right? Because I think a villain who's like, I have failed my family, I was the last hope and I have fucked everything up is a more interesting story than, hey, I'm a gigantic asshole, kill me with a sword, right?
Right. Like every so often you just want the W. But I think it's a little more harrowing in a lot of ways. Not the least of which being that this this actually makes Alexandra more of a shithead. But I'm happy. I'm happy with that. I think that
Well, she didn't necessarily know, right?
right, yeah,
Because
I
he's not
mean,
going to enter into marriage by going, "Hey, I come to you with my begging bowl, please."
yeah,
Like,
exactly. It was there was probably an amount of ruse there.
this is something she might learn as she goes through the Hollow.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I think the specter of family poverty is going to be something that haunts the Hollow.
Hmm.
And
And I think like
obviously it's
failure.
not hers. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that while the Hollow is encompassed within the setting of interesting in an interesting scenario here that's not always shared. The Hollow is sort of encompassed within the setting of Alexandra's worst day and of her seed. It's actually his Hollow, so there's got to be
Yeah,
some things in there that have nothing to do with Alexandra exactly, like this failure and this like letting the family down and things like that. That they can then the hunters will be interacting with and stumbling on this as well. And I do wonder, and this is a shot in the dark because I don't know his backstory entirely, but I do wonder if Sergeant Weeks might not relate to some of this.
it's interesting. I don't think we know a lot about Sergeant Weeks.
Yeah, no, it's sort of a, but I feel like as a once sergeant, no longer sergeant, who we do know he murdered his captain because the captain gave the order that got his team killed. There's probably a fear of failure in there as well.
He's got some history with letting people down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that'll be crunchy. Love it. Good stuff. Simon has said a couple of things for us here. Thank you,
Hmm.
Simon. That if it was a rapid hollowing, it could have pointed to pride or rage, and I think that we'll get into. I think we're between maybe two malignancies, but rage is a good one as well.
Mm.
But it's still probably quite a rapid hollowing, even if it was from turn down to it's maybe a course of a week, right? And then you said Tufty said. Then there's a potential interesting quandary of murder versus redemption, if this is the reasoning, right? And I think you've hit something there, Tufty, because if you think about it, right now, even though Alex isn't a good person, Alexandra sees this man as just a villain, completely arch nemesis, dickhead, like, and I mean, yeah, he's got some bad traits, but he had,
Yeah, he did still round up a mob and kill her entire family. He's not
yeah,
a nice man.
right, but it'll be interesting for everyone, but especially I think in her character development for her to learn and understand some of the motives, even if she's still like, yeah, you still murdered my family. So
There's also a thing that we talk about a lot throughout the manuscript of Hollows, right? Of Hunter's actions making the Isles slightly better. And we mean that both in like an ephemeral, they're a little bit less cursed now. The malignancies have slightly less of a hold and slightly fewer vessels. But we also mean it in a very tangible way. And it's conceivable that this team of hunters, after getting to go through the Hollow and understand the Lord, might come out going, what if we helped that family though?
yeah, and that's sort of like there's little slivers of hope dotted throughout Hollows, and it's kind of one of the things that can make this sort of this sort of very grim and harrowing repeated experience that the hunters are having, kind of that, and then the refuge itself being a place where you can kind
Yeah,
of take a step back. It makes this sustainable, right? Because
yeah.
even those of us who love a grim dark campaign, you need ups for the downs to hit worse, if
You have to
nothing
have
else.
stakes, right? Like we
Yeah,
know Hollows is a great combat game. Like, we've been demonstrating that like in stream after stream after stream, and I think they've all been just bangers. Go and watch the AP if you haven't. But this is how you turn Hollows into a campaign rather than just a series of violently cinematic one shots, right? It's how you connect what happens inside the Hollow to what your hunters do afterwards.
absolutely. And Simon has said it seems to Simon that Alexandra was just a means to an end. There doesn't really seem a lot of affection there, so it's maybe not a doomed romance. Doomed romance
Mm.
is maybe not the angle we're taking here, which I think is really fair. And I think that there probably wasn't affection from either side. I don't think that I don't think the turn down is a failure of romance, and that he was absolutely in love with her. I think it's that failure of his family, and for her, um, she didn't want anything to do with him. She didn't even want to be forced to marry, really. Um, and if I were doing a long-term campaign with Alexandra, um, one of the things I would explore is she interested in romance, and she just didn't want this expectation, or is she just like not into that at all? And there's really no time in our actual play to touch on deeper, longer things like that. But yeah,
Yeah, but every
she's.
time you say stuff about your character, and every time anyone says stuff about their character, I'm like, what if we just kept running it afterwards, though? What if we just had a Hollows game?
I mean,
What if
look,
Grant sacrificed one afternoon a week to entertain us like children?
I'm not against it. Um, Especially if we've got folks, coming in and hanging out and stuff. I mean, these chat streams are a bit quieter, but y'all really swarm in for the AP, and I'm loving that. And please keep doing that. But we had a kind of nuts couple of weeks with lots and lots of conventions, and we'll get back to the consistency. So you get your story soon, but for now, help Alexandra suffer. And with that, what's our malignancy? Chat, what's our malignancy?
What's our malignancy? First, let's see if we can remember what the malignancies are, shall we? That's always fun. So, you've got dominion, hunger, grief, fear, pride, rage. That's six. There are six malignancies, right?
I
That's
think
all of them.
so. I've
I
got
was
their
thinking
little
there are eight,
cards here
but
somewhere.
I know that we only sold six malignancy paintings in the back of kit, so that suggests there are six.
We're gonna go
Otherwise,
with
good
6.
news. We're gonna go with six. Six means we've finally learned how this setting works.
I think so. I think it's maybe the low hanging fruit, but there's a strong argument for pride.
Mm.
Even if he wanted to help his family and stuff, there's this underlying fear of failure, which can be rooted in pride. There's wanting to destroy her and her home and everything that they stand for because he can't have it. There's which could also be rage, and we'll touch that in a minute, I'm
Yeah,
sure. Um, and there's also like the fact now let me be very clear, no one likes losing their home, no one likes losing their way of life. Nobody is like, oh, this will be fine, I'll just be more modest. Like that's dumb. That's dumb. But there is this desperation not to become the people that they've subjugated this whole time. And that's a couple things, like maybe dominion, but it's also pride. So,
it's also conceivably fear.
true.
I think what you've already nailed there, right, is that malignancy speaks to motivation. It's not just what you do, it's what was going on in your head when you do it. That's what opens up the path for the grand malignancy to get its claws into you. Um, Also, very important that we're not saying malignancies are the cause of people doing these horrible things. Malignancies latch onto you when you are a horrible person that does these things, and that's a really important distinction. I just want to make sure we keep repeating
Yes. And
because
also that,
people
like,
are bad.
I would say that, um, yeah, it's when this thing twists within you, right? It's not the malignancy doing it.
Mm.
The malignancy is just like, ooh, yum. Um, these are all things that people do.
Yeah, this is perfectly human evil that something out there has taken a parasitic interest in. Fundamentally, is what we're saying. But which one was it?
Oof. So let me see here. I think we have 4 that are believable, and that's dominion, fear, pride, or rage.
Yeah. Initially, I thought it could be Dominion. And if we'd gone with a more sort of doomed romance story, it would become a narrative about him taking that power and expanding his power.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's where we are, so I think Dominion doesn't necessarily fit anymore.
And I think again, like, while that's a really good narrative about him as well, I think that it leans more into this sort of entity that we're just like, yes, let's destroy him, because who doesn't love being like, a person who is so hungry for power they committed atrocities, let's kill him. Um,
Right?
Great, but I think we're really reaching for something really difficult and harrowing for the hunters to go through in this case. So having a having a more relatable human motivation behind some of these atrocities.
You've also got to really watch your subtext in Hollows, right? And if we say this is about a cis man seizing power over a woman in a romantic context, we're veering really close to something that's like a hard no for a lot of game tables.
Right. Yeah. And it's and we've kind of already established that he's a number of those things. Um, that there's a power element here. That he is a well, presumably he's a cis man. It sort of then becomes like, how do we not just make this a caricature of something that people are upset about and does happen to people? How do we make this so that you're like, well, no, I mean, he did a really awful thing, um, that literally caused him to hollow. It was so bad, but he had he had motivation. It wasn't just mindless violence. I think it's interesting to kind of explore it from that as well, because as I said earlier, I think Alexandra is has never entertained that thought. Not for a second has she ever entertained that. In fact, she's never I think she's mostly never entertained that there was any reason any of this should have happened. I think that as time has pressed on a little bit, there's probably this inkling in the back of her mind that maybe the mob had some points. but I think that
But surely about the class structure as a whole, not about her
not
family.
about her family. It
No,
makes sense that they'd be upset at the class structure. Yeah, absolutely. But they were the good ones.
of course.
So
Yes, duties of care and responsibility and stuff.
exactly.
So it feels to me, right, like he didn't do this in the thought that he was gonna make the situation better. The idea wasn't that he could take the family home and take the fortune, right? It's just pure revenge. It's just lashing out. And I think that feels like either pride or rage.
I think
And
so.
obviously the two are really closely connected.
Yeah.
But I think you could toss a coin and either one of those would be good. So I don't know, chat, what
Chat.
feels good?
Pride or rage? And I'll talk about it for a minute while we wait for folks to come in. Um, but I think that something that's really notable is that he must have been at his absolute bottom, at his absolute lowest, for his response to this to be, right, my life is ruined, my family's life is ruined, we have no future, so I'm gonna tear it all down. Now, we've got one vote for pride. We have Simon saying if it's loss of standing, not the complete destitution for the ex, then it's the affront that probably steers it towards pride, so that's two for pride. Simon says rage seems like the unalloyed desire for pure revenge because of ruination. So, yeah, all really excellent points, folks. I think after a healthy roundabout here, I think pride might be where we're settling here. I think, there's aspects of other things. That's the thing, is that none of them necessarily exist in a vacuum of one another. So obviously he was angry. There was a sort of a rage there that he was probably afraid. And there could be this there's not really too much dominion, I guess, because he decided to destroy it rather than try to take it, but there's definitely fear and rage there just as well. But I think that maybe the seam is pride.
And I think there's a valid point there, right? That like a bunch of different malignancies could have got their claws into him through this. Pride's the one that did.
Yeah, I think that also lends for maybe some particularly interesting narrative within the Hollow as well, because we'll be able to really lean into some of the pride elements of it, and really be like the letting the family down sort of thing, but not necessarily in a fear, but in a like, you're better than this, you should have been better than
Yeah.
this, and those sorts of elements where I think for me when I'm thinking about a malignancy and which malignancy, then it's what theme do I want to lean on for this hollow if I'm
Yeah,
stuck. So I think pride might be a good one.
I think I think that's true. Yeah, that sounds like an interesting one I'm excited to build a hollow around.
Yes.
So let's do that. All
So
right.
we've got where's the hollow, we've got what the malignancy is, and I think we've got a little bit of time before we have to go. So, what do we want? Do we want to talk about vassals?
Yeah, so I think we can go two ways. I think we can do some more work on the hollow,
Mm-hmm.
which includes the vassals and the other entities that serve the Lord. I think that's super useful. Or we can talk about um, how we want it to feel to fight the Lord.
Ooh.
And do we want to lean more into the hollow or the entity? I have a suggestion, but I want to hear what you want to do first.
Um. Yeah, I was thinking maybe. So I think what I would like to do is whichever one is better to sit down and talk about right now, which might be the entity. I think that we have some, and this could go either way, but I think we have some kind of vague ideas on who some of these vassals might be, and it might be good to let the backers flesh that out. What's your thought?
So I think it would be cool to. Well, I think they've both got advantages, right? I think if we finish fleshing out the hollow, we can then ask the backers to help us more with fleshing out the entity and put some suggestions in for powers and have a
Right.
discussion about what we think our our mean pride dude can do. Or yeah, we can jump on and start talking about entity really briefly and throw those suggestions out now, and we can have the backers fill in both of the blanks for us. They can tell us who the vassals are and tell us how we should mechanize our lord. So I think if we
Let's.
talk about the entity now,
Yeah.
we
Um.
palm off more work on the backers.
It's true. It's true. I'll say. I'll say. I think the thing that's probably the best to leave for backers is some of these abilities, because some people will come in with some really cool
Oh
um, like concepts, and then we also have a lot of folks who did the playtests who actually have a really good handle on the rules as well, that might come in and be like, here's how to make this concept into this, or will pop in and be like, here's how we
yeah,
could make this concept into a mechanic. So yeah, I want to leave some of that, and I mean, it's very possible, depending on how these things progress, that on an off day from the AP chat and I pop on again and we all have another little chat about this. But for now, so I think one of the most interesting things that we touched on a lot earlier was this sort of isolation of one person.
yeah.
I really
I'm
like
sorry, I
that.
sounded too excited when I said
Yeah,
yeah.
let's do
Yeah.
that. um, yeah, I think that that's a really good starting point for one of the abilities, just because it really messes with the group dynamic, but in a way that's not so horrible that the players won't have fun.
Mm,
Or at least, ideally, you'd apply that in a way that people would still be enjoying the, it's not just like, and you can't do anything at all, fuck you. Like,
exactly. But we've already seen in 2 or 3 episodes of the AP that people fall back on the same tricks quite quickly.
mm-hmm.
Like you find a couple of combos that work and you do those. So I think a fight that forces you to change those up is good. That's good fun. That's good story.
Yeah. So that plays a couple of different roles, like
Yeah.
right there. Is maybe a sort of like, oh gosh, I'm trying to think. Maybe if you do damage in, I can't even just say damage in close, because then specifically Alexandra will just throw her knife. Bleeding? No, because bleeding doesn't always go off either,
I tell
and
you
it's
what.
too specific.
What if what if we go off in a different direction? We try to figure out what some of his other stuff should be,
You guys
and
can
then
help
we
us
figure out the
flesh it out.
mechanics afterwards.
Yeah, you guys can all help us flesh out the mechanics. Jeez. Yeah, so that's one thing he's able to do. So here's an interesting question. Obviously, he has shown that while his charisma failed to woo Alexandra, who might have just been unwooable, frankly. Um, that he's able to rally people. How do we make that into a mechanic?
So, in terms of the mechanics that we need for him, we need him to have a couple of attacks, a couple of cool special maneuvers that he can do, one interrupt so that he's got something to do at the end of a player move, and something that he does on break, right? The first time his resolve is knocked to zero, and he breaks and he starts getting really feared for his situation. And I think if we use something like a summon a mob ability or a conjure a mob ability for his on break, that that echoes his hollowing quite nicely, perhaps.
Yeah,
Like when the chips are down and he really starts taking this seriously, minions. What do you think?
I like that. I think that's a good option because the other like the things I'm thinking about in regard to mob, and I think Simon's just said something in the chat as well.
Uh,
So Simon said, "Oh, and this kind of leads to the other thing I was thinking about. So this is great. He was able to raise a mob, so hunters clustered together may be subject to some measure of control. That's an excellent point.
oh,
I was gonna say because he's so charismatic and he was able to hide his own sort of motivations and guise them as something else. Is there a way we can twist this charisma to control another or some other hunter in some way? So marrying that with what Simon uh, put in the chat, there's an element here of he has sway.
so I think we could reflect that sort of charm or domination as we can either do it with making an ability check to attack, but that's kind of boring, right? Because if you fail, then you just can't attack him. Then what do you do with your turn? Um,
True.
or that can be something that you have to fight past in your own head to attack him. So it could be something that causes you to take resolve damage if you try to attack him when you're targeted with this.
Yes. Or is there a is there an argument for being able to reposition hunters? Maybe reposition hunters if they're clustered?
Or reposition them so they're clustered.
Mmm.
Pull them all together into one place, and then we make one of his attacks something that targets everyone in an area.
I like that. Yeah. Well, I like resolve damage. I feel like something very physical, a physical element of actually moving them, shows this sort of control element that he has. And I think that we, like what you said of clustering them together, being able to physically cluster them together, I think lends to the mob aspect and also that control if he can get them all in one place and then do what he wants.
Yeah,
So,
I like that.
um, and I guess that makes the question be what's what he wants. Um, I mean, sort of. There's this element of burn it all, right?
Yep.
So I think something. My brain is like something destructive, something sort of reckless, but I'm not really sure what yet.
I kind of want to do something that in fiction has the hunters in an area turn on each other.
Yeah, me too. This is the worst. I love it. I'm so
This is
happy.
really fun though, right? Because it's incredibly hard to do support maneuvers if you're trying to avoid being in the same area as all of your
Yeah.
companions.
And that also then means that you're like, do I put myself at risk to first aid someone, for example,
Yeah,
or you know, do I let them die? And then if he's singling out this other person, the goal for this entity, whether or not it's how it plays out, like the thematic goal for this entity would be to kill off everyone but that one player,
yeah.
because it echoes his hollowing. Um, ooh, Ooh,
So I
Simon's on top of it.
oh
To
hello.
really mess things up, the resolve damage from weaponized charisma might be on a solo hunter in front, bearing the full brunt of his evil charm. Interesting. So there's something to be said about. Um, so my thought was leave one person standing.
Mm.
Um, But there's something to be said about like how does he exercise this? Is it resolve damage? Is it
Well, we can do it two ways. So we can have this, what I've tentatively started calling live to tell the tale, this one hunter that he's leaving alive. And we can have that be a special maneuver, right? Every turn he picks one. Spoiler, it's the same one. And something bad happens to them when they try to attack the entity. Because like we talked about earlier, right, this is the preventing you from taking control of the situation.
Yeah.
But we can also use it as his interrupt in the way that Simon suggested. Right, so his interrupt is the area with the most threat, say, the area where his attention currently is, any hunter who's alone in that area takes resolve damage just from being like the full focus of his attention.
Yeah, and the thing is that it doesn't have to be this live to tell the tale target either, because
No, not at all.
people are going to naturally, if they find out that he can cluster them, they're going to try to uncluster. And as soon
Yeah,
as they're out, he's like, bam, you're alone, you're weak, now you're dead.
yeah.
So,
This is the great thing, right? We want to give him multiple tricks so that it's not just okay, we avoid clustering and then it's an easy fight. So yeah, if we have something where a hunter who's alone in an area takes resolve damage equal to the threat in an area,
yes, yeah,
that's
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 good.
just good fun.
I like it. Gemelli says they've played around with an entity giving players a curse token that causes an extra test before their attack goes through. On a fail, the GM would pick a different hunter to be the target of the attack. And I think that we can do that sort of in a more informal way here, in that
Mm.
because this singling out in this person's hollowing, the singling out of Alexandra was very pointed and chosen. We can kind of give the entity and therefore the GM the sort of autonomy to decide who they're targeting and whether or not they continue to target them. I don't know if I actually. I really like what you've put out there, just in general as a mechanic. That's really cool. But there's a part of me that I don't want the hunters to have the agency to break out of this.
I also I try to avoid slowing a combat down, right? And if you add another test before you make your attack, then you've added another thing where you've got to check the target, figure out the result. Um, if there's a way that we can mechanize it that keeps it flowing, then that better suits my GMing.
Um, Simon has added that linking it to threat is a really good idea that we were talking about, because it gives threat manipulators a bigger role to play in the and like Alexandra's actually a threat manipulator. She doesn't show it yet because she, again, like I said, she just keeps trying to stab things. But but like a big aspect of her build is threat manipulator. So in a way, like there's a lot of aspects here, almost unintentionally, that are forcing her to act outside of her urge to just stab things. So that's really interesting, just from a narrative perspective.
So I think we've got potentially a couple of interesting maneuvers because we've got this
Yes.
one where he can pull the hunters into one area. We've got live to tell the tale. We've got what he does on first break, which is summon a mob, which we have not mechanized yet. Look forward to helping with that, chat. And then for his interrupt, we've got weaponized charisma. We've got one attack that is horrible damage to everyone in a single area. And I think we just need one other attack. And then we've got most of an entity. So, what other strand of this fiction can we bring in for this last attack?
This is where I'm like, okay, hold on, because we've got we've already got his sort of destructive nature,
Mhm.
although we can double down on that. We've
Yeah,
got
of course.
his charismatic controlling nature. Ooh, I don't know. but maybe there's something in this aspect of him where he sees like maybe, but that would be more like a post. That would be weird because it would be like a post break mechanic. But I mean, I'll just say out loud what I'm thinking. Um, but like the idea that he saw his failure and he went, I'm done, everything's done, so I'm going to bring everything down with me. And if there's a sense of him being able to do something to himself, to do something to someone else as well, it's sort of like, yeah,
Mm.
that sort of mutually destructive.
Yeah, we can definitely do something with that self-destructive ability.
Simon suggested, and I'll pop this one over to you. But Simon suggested, like with the subtext around social standing and failure, maybe despair-based, resolve-focused attack versus wise. How much we've tossed around resolve a lot as far as do we resolve this? Do we resolve this? Have we actually used resolve yet? Or have we always gone, oh, but what about this? Because I don't want to put too much resolve in, but I don't know if we actually have.
Most of these attacks should have. It's always succeed, fail, right? The hunter's always going to make a defense roll. So for most of these attacks, it'll be resolve or wounds. But I really like the idea of. I really like the idea of something targeting wise,
Yeah.
because it's something that usually is reserved for like magic and sorcery and weird arcane stuff.
There's something there.
There's definitely something there. Something that targets wise.
This one might be a work in progress. Maybe we don't nail this last attack down, and we'll put it to y'all. But
I think that's good. I think we say we've got an attack that is something about his self-destructive nature, and we know we want it to target wise. How do you want to mechanize that?
yeah, yeah, we don't. We've done a lot. We've done a lot here with your all's help.
Yeah.
Let's open the floor. We'll leave this last one to y'all on the backer kit. So we've got obviously the forums on backer kit. Definitely come check that out. Come talk to us on there and help us continue to develop this.
So I've got thoughts about the way that we take this forward, and I think the way that we should probably do this is to have some. The dogs also have thoughts on this. Sorry, y'all.
It's pupper time.
They would like to go outside. There is a bird, and they must deal with it immediately. Right. Yep. The way I would like to do this is maybe we open some discussion threads on the Backkit page, and we can have some open discussions. And anybody who wants to suggest rules and get deep into it can do that, because some of you have got really good experience playtesting and just running hollows, which would be rad. And then I think we'll give that a couple of days, and then maybe we'll do some closed polls so people can choose whichever outcome they like for each mechanic. Sound good?
These have been great. Like everything you all have been providing here has been fantastic. And I know we'll get more as people are able to watch this asynchronously and come in and have their own thoughts about this. We don't really want to make this stream too long either, so that it's not so that folks can catch up and join the conversation quickly. But before we sign out, if you have time, a few minutes, Chant, do we want to kind of outline really quick a few rough ideas of some vassals, and then folks can help add to this? So, like, we've got the mob. Alexandra's dead family. Is his family in there?
Oh, I think they should be.
And then here's a question, folks, for us all to think. So we've decided maybe the mob are real people that can be won over. Alexandra's dead family are definitely probably not, because they're dead. But they could be.
I think doing that once in a hollow is fun. Doing it a lot,
it becomes samey, right?
I don't know. Yeah.
But I think because they're definitely dead. They died, so
Yep.
there are probably some Gosh, what would you? But they're definitely a creation of the Hollow, right?
Yes.
Um, and then the third one is the question to mull about is obviously we like the mob being real people. That's great. If we were to put another group of real people in, do we want to think about did he trap his actual family in a hollow? Or is he just living with the consequence of his failure in this personified version of his family that is in this hollow? And that's a question I want to leave you all with.
Well, if it was just me doing this, I would have both, right? 'Cause you never just need to choose. I would have like a sibling or a cousin or somebody who arrived at Alexandra Brackett's house to try and talk him down from what he was about to do and is trapped in
Shit.
the hollow. And I
Oh!
and I would also have the specter of like his domineering mother or father or whichever like dowager of the family put this burden on him in there as a vassal that you have to kill.
That's good
That's what
shit.
I would do.
I like them both. I say we go for it. So these are some ideas, right? If you have any other, we'll definitely have those discussion threads up. But have a think, folks. If you have any other ideas for things that can be encountered, in this hollow, and something that we haven't touched on much that we don't necessarily need to, but just something to consider that we haven't, is we've got all of these real people taking people forms, but things can get kind of weird in a hollow. Does this specter of the dominating matriarch or domineering matriarch or patriarch, is it fully a human person now, or is it something else? So those are some things to think about. Um, and Simon has said another thing to think about. There's the accelerated timeline aspect. So, what sort of world has he built? Big questions. I feel like there's got to be an element here of. So there's one of two. There's many ways you could do it, but there are two possible ways we could go with this, and many, many more that I haven't yet entertained. One being that this hollowing and this world and this day of his life was the lowest of the low, the I'll bring it all down, I'll tear it all down, his ultimate failure. And so, how does that then become something? But there's the other side of that. If you take it from that step, there's this sinking hole, this deep dark pit of despair. And again, we can do both, but there's the other side of it in that he hit his bottom, his rock bottom. He hollowed out. He has this newfound power within this hollow. This is a malignancy of pride. What does he do? And maybe he himself maybe the hollow itself is split between this war over his own personal despair and failure and his desperate clawing attempt to take back any power and any pride and anything that he had, and try to reclaim that for himself.
I love that. And I think you can really zone that hollow beautifully because I think you could fit each of the vassals that we've talked about to one of those two concepts.
Yeah,
And then you've got a hollow that hasn't just got like a single dead simple aesthetic. You get to change it up because there's nothing worse than the GM is going, yep, more soiled curtains.
they're angry.
It's another banquet table. Crack on.
They're still
You know what to do.
angry.
Yeah, exactly. So I really like the idea of bringing those two threads in.
Love it. Well,
Nice bit of environmental storytelling. Yeah.
good stuff. All right. Well, um, we've been here for a little bit of time, and we've come up
Mhm.
with a lot of things, and you have all helped a whole lot. It's been great. Simon brings up another thing we haven't yet talked about that we will take to discussions, which is what's happening in this hollow as the Doom track racks up with these two poles.
Oh, he's so right.
Oh, and by the way, Simon did also say thank you. This was really illuminating on how to approach the design of a hollow. Simon, you have been integral. I cannot speak today. You have been an
We're here to think, not
integral
talk.
help to the development of these things, as well as Gemelli, thank you, Tufty, thank you. Thanks to everyone else who came in and offered support and thoughts as well, including someone who came in on YouTube and said, "Did a character already turn into a hollow?" Which is a valid concern, but no,
There
not
is a
yet.
part of me that wants to do a rug pull in this, right? And for it to turn out that the X is in fact just the third vassal in the hollow. And
And
after you defeat the X, it turns out
it's
it's Alex's
Alexandra.
hollow all along.
Oh God, that's heart wrenching. I
But we're
have
not
always
ready to say
said
goodbye to her, is the
no.
thing.
I know, and it's hard because I've said I'll just impart a little bit of things I've said about Alexandra to non-players. Is that at the moment we're entering episode 3. She's made a little bit of a connection with Merlin, uh, just on the smallest bit, but overall she's still the Alexandra that I introduced, which is uh, a bad person. um,
She's
and
not going to get any better hanging out with Merlin.
I think, and it may or may not be true because I'm not taking everything into account, but I think at the moment she's the closest to hollowing. She is hellbent on revenge. And it's the only thing she thinks about. When she wakes up, she thinks about killing her ex. And when she goes to bed, she thinks about killing her ex. And that does not make a well rounded person. And I think the small moments in between are only barely holding her together. And what's going to be very interesting for Alexandra is if that continues to deteriorate and she eventually becomes a hollow, whether that's in this wish list long-term campaign we really want, or whether it's somewhere off screen, but whether this just that no one gets through to her, and she doesn't allow anyone to get through to her, and she just deteriorates to become a hollow, or she kills her ex and finds out that she doesn't feel any better and nothing's better, and that's the end of it, and she becomes a hollow. At which point does this happen to Alexandra, or does she make some meaningful connections with people and stall it longer? And right now it could go either way. And something I like to do with my characters is pose this question that ultimately, it's not that I have no control over it, but that it's highly affected by the choices the GM makes, the choices the other player characters make, the external factors that weigh down on that character. And bringing that all together to be like, it's not anyone's fault that this happened, but your external factors are a motivation for, X, Y, and Z. So
100%.
at the moment, I think she's the closest to hollowing, but that doesn't mean she's the one that hollows. It all depends.
And that's how you make a good character, folks. That's how you make a character with the kind of backstory that GMs go, oh, I want to put my fingers in there and wriggle them around.
I love giving threads. I'm like, here's a thread, here's a thread, here's a thread, and you get a thread, and you get a thread. Fun.
I think of them as open wounds on a character. They're both equally true.
Threads in the sense of the tailor we just fought.
Yes, very much so. On
So,
little sharp serrated needles.
so yeah, it
Yeah.
could be a really harrowing end in that we don't, whether or not we play it out. She kills the ex and she's like, oh, I'm empty. And
It's also going to force us to answer the question of can you hollow inside someone else's hollow?
can you hollow in a hollow? Or
Hey
is it
dog, I
the
heard you like hollows.
so there's the question there as well, right? Without getting too off topic of if the answer is no, does that mean one, if let's use Alexandra as an example, this happens. If she stays in the refuge, does she ever hollow? But then the other side is what happens is hollow to refuge, refuge to real world, bam, hollow.
Oh my god, that is just a GM's dream, right? You spend 6 stories inventing reasons why Alexandra has to leave the refuge until you finally get her, and she sets foot outside and hollow.
Horrible, love it.
Just
Terrible.
right there in the middle of a market town.
Oh no. Well, folks, we'll see you for round 2 when we just design Alexandra's hollow. Oh, gosh, I love hollows. It's probably a good
My
time
head's
to.
so full of horrible things. We should probably stop now.
Yeah, yeah, it's probably a good
Yeah.
time to say, all right, we sure have done a whole lot, and you've all helped a lot, and it's been so good to have you all here in the chat, hanging out with us and building this. And we will take this conversation to BackerKit, which you can get to by following the link I just popped into chat. That's rrdgames.com/hollows. If there's anyone listening to this, either video on demand or somehow you're in the chat right now with us and you have never played the quick start and don't have your hands on it, there's a little banner on the backer kit that says get your free quick start or something to that effect, and it is free and there are no strings attached and it's really cool. Also, if you are an American particularly, but if your local RPG retailer, geez Louise, that was hard to get those words out, participates in free RPG day, you're gonna wanna go, because this is our contribution to Free RPG Day, folks. That's the little Free RPG Day logo down there. Probably one of the most, if not the most gorgeous free book that we've ever made. We went pretty over the top with it. So that is this Saturday, the 22nd. Please go get your copy of the Sins of Grisham Priory Quick
Hey,
Start.
go find out if they're running hollows. You might be able to go and play the Sins of Grisham Priory. And if they're not, then that is basically an open invitation for you to walk in and say, hey, can I have that copy of Hollows that you got?
So, just to let you all know, that's what's going on for us. Thank you so much for all of the we're getting lots of lovely support from folks. Thank you, everyone.
Aw.
You're the best. Without you, without the community, what would we have? So, yes, or you could run it for them. Exactly. That's the unspoken bit there. Chant is if they're not
We would
running
never dream of
hollows,
asking, but
you could, and then
all of you in the chat, we know full well that you in particular could. You've just proved it.
yeah. Thank you for saying it out loud. Also, Tiger90. I couldn't figure out how to shorten that name. Okay, I didn't want to call you old or slow. Tiger. Hey, Tiger.
Tiger.
Hey,
Feels
Tiger.
safe. Hey, Tiger. Hey, champ.
Sorry for winking at the camera. It was reflexive. When I said Tiger, it just happened.
I can see how that would happen.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for being here, for joining us, for helping us get this off the ground, and we'll see you on BackerKit, where we nail some of these down, put some polls up, have some discussions, and create Alexandra's Hollow. I mean, what?
Da, da, da.
No. By the way, we haven't named this guy yet, so we'll put up a poll.
We'll open up a whole new pledge tier that's Name the Asshole.
Name the asshole pledge tier. Have the asshole named after you pledge tier.
Named after the individual of your choice.
Oh no! We can't. We're not doing that.
We
There's
would
a lot of
not.
reasons why
There's
we can't, but
some really obvious reasons we're not doing that,
but no, I think if Alexandra is gonna hollow soon, I'm now team avoid stepping out of the refuge. That's just great. That's just so narratively solid. I love it. All right, thank you all for being here. Chant, thank you for being here with me. This has been
Thank you.
a blast. Everyone in chat, thank you for the ridiculous names you're suggesting in chat right now, but if I keep reading the things you're saying, we're never going to go eat dinner. Tronald is potentially my favourite so far. But,
That, oh god, that's gonna stick, isn't it?
we will, I hope not. Maybe it's his middle name. We'll see. We'll
Damn
see
it,
you
chat
all
won't load.
at the very latest. We will see you next Monday at 4:30 British time, and I don't know, who knows, maybe something else will come along before or after that, but that all depends on how many other I mean, if you guys knock a bunch of stretch goals out, we might just have to get on and chat, it's... Congratulations, by the way, Hollows folks, on the 175 and the two new hollows that I mentioned earlier in this stream. But grab that quick start if you haven't already. Check out the backer kit, and we will see you next Monday at 4:30. Bye, folks.
Bye.